Hello, uh, Brian Steppe again, astrologer from Santa Fe, New Mexico. And this is a continuing presentation about Uranus-Pluto configurations, particularly the configuration that's going to occur, seems like a long way from now, 20 years, September 2046. Uranus and Pluto are coming into a 180-degree opposition uh, in September of 2046. And within a few years of 2046, Victarnus says about 15 degrees uh, before and after the exact of September, which is a year or two before and after, two or three. The similar energies evolve and manifest in a person's life and in the global collective. It's the same uh, configuration, the 180-degree full moon, Uranus, Pluto, 180-degree configuration that occurred in 1792 when the French Revolution occurred. And so we can expect the same energies to happen in 2046. One of the keys that is significant for me that I got from Rick Tarnas, Cosmos and Psyche, is that we can use this knowledge now. Like humans couldn't use that knowledge in 2046. I mean, in 1792, humans couldn't use that knowledge because we didn't have the knowledge that Uranus and Pluto, their configurations, manifested this energy at that time. We didn't have the consciousness. Now we have that knowledge and we have advanced technical abilities where we can apply it. In fact, in 1792, Uranus was just barely discovered by an astronomer in England. In 1781, they discovered Uranus. And so astrologers had to observe Uranus and see what their manifestation, didn't even know what the significance of Uranus was until we looked at what was happening with people in people's natal charts and in and in the world. So it took time to look at that. And in 1792, we didn't have conscious knowledge of Pluto. It wasn't until 1930 when it was discovered. Scientists discovered Pluto. And so, and then in 1965, October 1965, Uranus and Pluto came together, but we didn't have the technical knowledge or the knowledge of these two planets to really prepare for that, what was going to happen in the 60s. But now that we have the knowledge here in 2025, we can start thinking about what's going to happen in 2046 when Uranus and Pluto are going to be, the same energies are going to be happening that were happening in the French Revolution and in the 1960s. And there are other periods that I want to bring in where they came into alignment and similar themes. But I don't think there's such a significant time as the French Revolution and the Uranus-Pluto opposition and the conjunction in 1965. And so that's what I want to start to do, is bring it into consciousness for those people who want to use it, and we can think and we can prepare. So it's similar to in 1792, if 20 years before 1792, people in the world who were knowledgeable, like we are today, they could have said, okay, we know in the early 1790s, there's going to be this energy that's happening that's related to Uranus and Pluto, which are revolution, change, throwing out old traditions, the leveling out of the equality of people. Instead of having a king and aristocracy, one man, one vote, and the beginnings of, there's a constant struggle for everyone to be treated equal, whether you're a man or woman, whatever your gender is, whatever the color of your skin is, whatever your religion is, whatever your ethnicity is. And in these times of Uranus and Pluto, it comes to be a leveling off. And those who are oppressed begin to throw off oppression. And that's what's going to happen in 2046. So let's go to this. And okay, so preparing for the future. Again, it's consciousness. So my name is Brian Steppe, briansteppe.com if you're interested to get a reading. Okay, and so a lot of this has to do with what I learned from Rick Tarnas. He's a Jungian psychologist, and here is Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud. They had a revolution of psychology in the early 1900s. It's a depth psychology. Freud wrote Interpretation of Dreams in 1895. Jung expanded on dreams. It was all about the unconscious. Well, part of this presentation is about us becoming more conscious of these forces that seem to manifest in the collective at different times when different planets get together. And the more we make that conscious, the more we learn about it, the more that we can help shape what's going to be in the future. And so I want to pay my tribute to my teachers, Rick Tarnas, and also his teachers, Carl Jung, Sigmund Freud. Rick Tarnas is a depth psychologist. And the schools that he's involved with, the depth psychology, are the California Institute for Integral Studies in San Francisco. Rick Tarnas taught there, and also the Pacifica Graduate Institute in Santa Barbara is a Jungian school. Okay, and so what I've described is what I think is important for astrologers and people to begin to think about astrology and to use it in a way where we can think about the future. A lot of times we're paying attention now to a lot of alignments. Saturn Neptune is coming into a conjunction in the next year, which is going to be similar to what the time of 1989 and the fall of the Berlin Wall and the dissolution of Soviet Union. Well, we're coming to certain energies that are happening now, similar to that, where the United States is breaking down a lot of the alliances that they've had in the past and reforming alliances. So that's Saturn Neptune. And so there's different ones. A significant one was a big one was when Saturn and Pluto came into a conjunction in 2020. In January of 2020, that's when the COVID-19 pandemic exploded and everybody had to stay home. It's like a Saturn Pluto where walls are built. And so we are using the knowledge of these conjunctions, and I just want to expand it to what is going to happen in the future. Here's my acknowledgement again for Rick Tarnas in his book Cosmos and Psyche. Recommend that. A lot of this is based on his work. And again, this is about Uranus-Pluto alignments and historical patterns and future projections. Again, 1792. So here's a chart of 1792. Uranus was in Leo. So this is an astrological chart with 12 signs, 12 houses. So a little bit about a chart that I presented before is in Western astrology, about two or 300 BC, the Greeks and the Babylonians came up with the zodiac, and they broke it into different houses. You see my cursor, the first house, second house, third, fourth, all of these houses, each house they've found to signify different areas of a person, an individual person's life. The first house is about the physical body and their sense of self. The second house is about money and their possessions. Third house is about your neighborhood and siblings. Fourth house is about your home. And the fifth house is about children and creativity. Sixth house is about your work and service to others. Seventh house is about your relationships, from your first house of yourself to your partners, like a marriage or other relationships, partnerships that you have. The eighth house is about other people's money. Second house you see is about your money, personal money, and the eighth house is about maybe your debts, other people's. Ninth house is about higher learning, travel, higher consciousness. 10th house is about how you present yourself to the world. Could be your career, usually, or how you manifest to the rest of the world. The 11th house is about groups and friends, and the 12th house is about self-undoing and things that you don't see about yourself. So each of these are different houses. But in 1792, Uranus and Pluto came to an opposition. And Uranus is about revolution and change, and Pluto is about volcanic power and tearing down structures, and they came into an opposition. And that's when French Revolution erupted. The king was overthrown. The king and his wife were executed. And actually, there was a reign of terror, and it got really bad, but it was a complete revolution at that time. And that in 2046, the same configuration is going to happen in 20 years. So we can start thinking about it. What are we going to do? What's the world going to look like at that time? What actions do we need to take to help foster the kind of cultural evolution that we want, we've decided. And so the themes of the French Revolution are a cataclysmic liberation, a mass uprising against entrenched power, seeking universal equality and new social contracts. So this comes from Cosmos and Psyche. This information comes from Richard Tarnas in his book, Cosmos and Psyche. So I want to acknowledge that. And there was, at that time, with Pluto involved, there's a lot of times there's death and destruction and violence. Well, there is a reign of terror. And the people took the law into their own hands, and they guillotined thousands of people in Paris. And so in 2046, we can figure those energies, those violent energies are going to manifest. And if we can prepare for them now, maybe we can contain it and see when it comes and try to make sure that it doesn't get out of hand like it did in the French Revolution. And then there's a time of the Enlightenment principles were formed into like a religion. And the Catholic Church was thrown down at that time. So there was like a religious fervor and revolution at that time too, French Revolution. Again, here's a chart for the French Revolution with Uranus. This is the glyph of Uranus. In 1792 was in Leo, and then Pluto was in Aquarius, 1792. 180-degree opposition, which is what's going to happen in 2046. And so key events in the French Revolution was the sorting of Tuileries. There's sudden rupture of monarchical power. So they overthrew the king. They overthrew the king. And so the theme is still churning throughout the world. Should we have an autocrat or a king, or should the majority of the people be ruling? And that's a constant theme and something to decide whether we're going to fight for or not. Proclamation of the First Republic in 1792. So they, instead of having a kingdom, they had a republic. And then the Reign of Terror also in the French Revolution. Again, this occurred when Uranus and Pluto were in opposition, 1792, which is the same configuration that's going to be in September 2046. So within a few years of that time, some of these energies are going to manifest. What are we going to do? We have a chance to think about it and teach our children. What are we going to do? Something's going to happen at that time. It's similar to before January 2020, astrologers were looking at Saturn and Pluto coming together as a conjunction, as they did in January 12th, 2020. And people were talking about, well, some of the same things, and there were some bad themes of building walls, prisons, and we didn't know exactly what was going to happen, but we knew something was going to happen. And sure enough, in 2020, the pandemic happened. And so the more we can look forward towards these configurations and plan, the more we can actively and consciously use it as part of implementing the kind of human cultural evolution that we want. So this was, again, 1965, the 60s. Most historians, when we look back, the 60s was one of the most dynamic times of the 20th century. And in October 1965, Uranus and Pluto came together in Virgo in October 1965. It says it was also exact in December 1965. And the themes that happened in the 1960s: collective experimentation, explosion of new social forms, communes, alternative lifestyles, radical political movements, technological liberation, space flight milestones, early computing advances, the rise of psychedelia, Eastern spiritual currents. These things happened in the 60s, and we can expect similar themes to happen in 2046, when Uranus and Pluto are in opposition. Key events of the 60s: Watts riots in 1865. This was Black people rising up against white oppression and white supremacy. There's a free speech movement and challenge to the Vietnam War. And so the students rose up against the establishment of the universities and political orthodoxy. And there was psychedelic and human potential movements. Esalen Institute. Those are events in the 60s. And we can figure that in 2046, the same archetypal energies are going to manifest. So what are we going to do about it? And so one of the main things is to present that astrology is presented. There are different ways you can look at it, but one is that history goes in cycles based on different energies at different times. And right now, some people think there's a downward pull into a reaction across the world into authoritarianism. Well, and some people think, well, this is really the end of the world, if that's what you think. But actually, we can also think that there is going to be a future and there's going to be a different time. And there's going to be a time when we can raise up these energies again and continue to implement them and teach our children about them. So projecting to September 2046, when Uranus and Pluto come into the opposition again, like they did in the French Revolution, you can figure there would be some polarized innovation versus systemic deep power, a global tug of war between emergent technologies, social paradigms, and entrenched power structures, mass awakening and backlash, potential for widespread collective mobilizations, digital activism, decentralized movements countered by intensified surveillance control measures, and a catalytic crisis, breakthroughs in the fields of artificial intelligence, biotechnology, climate interventions could trigger both utopian visions and dystopian fears. Those are some things to think about. We're not sure. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen in 20 years, but we can start to consider possibilities. And so globally, in the 2040s, when Uranus and Pluto come into the opposition, there's probably artificial intelligence is a big theme now with ChatGPT and other companies building robots, and a lot of it has to do with Pluto moving into Aquarius just this year. It actually first entered last year, but it's going to be there pretty much until the 2040s. There'll be new forms of digital community and decentralized governance, a resurgence of identity-based politics and techno-authoritarian responses. Those are possible things to look at. And again, here is the opposition in 2046 of Uranus in Virgo, Pluto's in Pisces. And so, again, I want to point out, Pluto right now, it takes about 20 years for Pluto to go through a sign. And so it just entered Aquarius. And this is when Aquarius is about computers, the future, artificial intelligence, technology, advances in technology, among other things. It's also about egalitarian themes, power to the people, things such as that. And it's going to be in Aquarius for the next 20 years. So there's going to be a lot of artificial intelligence, technological progress. But in 20 years, Uranus is going to move. Uranus is right now just going into Gemini this summer, temporarily going back to Pisces, but it's going to be in Gemini for 7 years. Uranus stays in one sign about 7 years. So it'll be 7 years in Gemini, and then it's going to go into Cancer, 7 years, and then Leo, 7 years. And then, so within about 20 years, it's going to come into an opposition with Pluto. So this is just, again, this series of videos is just an opportunity for people to become conscious of things that 100 years ago or 200 years ago, it was impossible for humans to be conscious of because we just weren't that advanced. We were just learning about astrology. We just learned that Uranus was there. We didn't even know Pluto was there until 1930. So this is a consciousness raising video education. And again, Uranus and Pluto conjunction in 1965. And then some strategies to approach for the next 20 years as we think about when Uranus and Pluto are going to come into opposition is first to become conscious, to have daily routines blending techno-savvy with depth practices, meditation, and to think, how can we use artificial intelligence in a positive way? Ethical innovation, join and form values-driven hackathons and co-ops that prototype socially beneficial tech. So think about how can we use technology in a positive way to harness the energies that we know are going to happen in 2046. It's an individual engagement. And then institutional. There's governments that they can establish cross-departmental teams that run scenario-based simulations around emerging disruptive technologies. Ethics and oversight frameworks, co-create public councils to guide AI, biotech, climate interventions. These are just some ideas to begin thinking about what's going to happen in 2046. Globally, this is a Pluto glyph. Transnational coalitions, forge alliances with non-governmental organizations and technology organizations dedicated to balancing innovation with human rights. Early warning networks develop integrated systems combining astrological cycle analysis with socio-economic and environmental indicators. Just some things to start thinking about to raise our consciousness about what the energies are going to be available and how are we going to act during that time of when Uranus and Pluto come into their opposition. This is just some of the a slide about Pluto going through the sign of Aquarius. Pluto's just entered Aquarius, and it's going to be 20 years. And at the end of those 20 years, that's when he's going to just move into Pisces and be in a opposition to Uranus. But Pluto's going to go through Aquarius for the next 20 years. And there's a lot of talk about astrologers about Pluto and Aquarius Pluto is like a plow. So it goes through and it's digging up artificial intelligence, robots, agentic AI. How are we going to integrate artificial intelligence into our world? In the next 20 years, we're going to be facing a lot of that. And then again, the final shift out of Aquarius is in 2044, just about the time that it'll be in an opposition with Uranus. And so there's another presentation about consciousness raising about Uranus and Pluto, the opposition that's coming up. There's a lot more. There's always things going on now. Actually, Uranus and Pluto are going to come into a trine within the next year, which is more benign or easier aspects, whereas the quadrature aspects has more power and more tension. So Uranus and Pluto cycles catalyze both upheaval and renewal. 1792, the French Revolution, and the 1960s show that there are patterns of liberation, backlash, and transformation that occur and we can expect it in September 24th, 2046. It will echo these dynamics in artificial intelligence, climate, and social movements. And for further resources, here's my name is Brian Steppe. This is my website, briansteppe.com. Again, I honor Richard Tarnas, who brought my consciousness into all of this information with the book Cosmos and Psyche. I encourage everybody to read it. And then I have a YouTube channel, Brian Steppe, if you want to see any of my YouTube videos. So thank you very much until next time. Have a fantastic day.